Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to another episode of Bench Opinions, everyone. It's round 2 of the Investec Champions Cup. We've had some great rugby over the weekend, some South African teams that did well, some British teams that did well, some French teams that struggled. We're going to cover a few of the big games this week. We're going to talk about Northampton Bulls. We're going to talk about Glasgow Toulouse. We're going to talk about the Sharks, who got a surprising victory. And then we're going to close out talking about the big game of the week, Toulon versus Bath. And then there's a few other talking points to get through this week. Some La Rochelle players unhappy that they had to travel all the way to Port Elizabeth to play a game. But it seems like that's just the way the cookie crumbles these days. Klaus, did you catch any of the rugby this weekend?
Yeah, I caught a couple of the games. I don't think my girlfriend was too impressed with me. I was watching the Stormers La Rochelle game on a double date with her and a couple of friends of ours. So kind of had to keep most of my attention to the dinner table, but also kept half an eye on the game whilst it was unfolding. Obviously a very exciting game.
Actually caught it from, I caught it in flight. That game with some of the airlines, you now get access to Starlink.
Oh, nice!
Which gives you free internet access while you're on board, and the quality is so good that you can actually stream matches. So I watched it with my seat partner. We're in a bit of a different constellation today. We're obviously doing a video podcast. We're in very different parts of the world these days. Dom is still out of order, watching the mighty United play, and Klaus and I are going to take things on today. I'm in South Africa. Klaus is still in rainy Berlin. Let's start with Northampton Bulls, Klaus. Last week, we predicted that the Bulls wouldn't mind getting their hands on a few of those players, specifically a certain Henry Pollock. It didn't go that way.
I think Henry Pollock heard all of the comments that were being made about him and decided to really show up because he was unreal. It was really the Henry Pollock show. That guy was running around like a man possessed and really putting in a good shift for Northampton. Also, the work that he does off the ball is pretty impressive for a guy that's that young. You kind of expect him to be very good when he has the ball in hand, but the work that he does off the ball, even just sort of running around to the other side of the ruck, drawing the attention of defenders to open up the space for other guys. He did that a couple of times, including awesome offloads and stuff like that. So hats off. He played a great game, and the Bulls got shown their asses because they did not show up at all.
No, they did rotate a lot. Something we're going to touch on a little bit later with the way that the tournament's been formatted now. George Hendy coming away with a hat-trick in that game, and the backline, like you said, really fired for the Northampton Saints. I saw a comment underneath the highlights for the game saying in each try you can see Henry Pollock one or two passes away from the ball, either giving it or waiting to receive it. He is an impact player and he does make himself known. I don't know if as many Bulls players were maybe as tuned up to get into him. I don't know if that's maybe more on the international stage, but he definitely, or let's say the Northampton Saints, definitely put a marker down as a real contender for the title this year.
I think the players that talk about having a, I don't know, not a vendetta, but wanting to put a target on his back are more the retired South African players who maybe don't understand the new age of TikTok and showboating and all of that sort of stuff, which is now sort of come into the game. I don't think any of the current players are really too fussed whether he celebrates or not. That might just be more the ex-players and maybe more the older generation of fans. But Newcastle, Northampton as a whole play very they execute very well as a team. And yes, they have great players, including the likes of Henry Pollock, but also JJ van der Mesch also plays extremely well, huge lock. And as a team, they're very cohesive and manage to really manipulate the defensive line of the opposition quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to some other big games of the weekend. One that's, I think, holds a interesting part, especially for South African fans, is that the Sharks managed to get a win against a Saracens side that did have a lot of changes. It's definitely not their first string side, but a win nonetheless. Sharks winning 28-23 in Durban with a lot of the Springboks back. Klaus?
It was an interesting one because it was quite a rainy one, and you would think that those conditions would rather suit the English side than the South African side. But having those Springboks back, I think, did bring a little bit of maturity to their game, maybe tighten it up a bit so that they're not quite as loose. And them having gotten rid of their coach, what was it, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, I think has given them maybe a different lease on life, if I could say it like that.
I think it'll always come with a little bit of like a fresh attitude. Your players could still have been backing the old coach. I do believe that a lot of the players were actually fans of Plumtree, but sometimes when you do change the coach, it just sort of resets things. Esther Hazen also captaining this weekend, and JP Peterson talking about the relationship that he's had with him, how they actually played together, and it would be interesting to see if that's something that he persists with. Like I said, a lot of talent in that Sharks 11, and it was just about finding the right coach to make them gel. Obviously, I think this is a bit early for someone to say, okay, JP Peterson is the one. But if he finds a way to almost let the players play and just finds the right bit of strategy for them, then it could work out for him.
Look, it's early days, as you said, and it's very easy it's easier to win at home. Let's see how they do on the road when they go over to Europe or to the UK and have to play a tough match over there. It could be a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, let's not hype the Sharks up too quickly, because I, for one, will be the first one to celebrate when they fail again. I think next up, one of the biggest games of the weekend was Glasgow versus Toulouse. Glasgow played at home. The two of us both last week didn't give Glasgow an immense shout, but they definitely proved us wrong. They were 21-0 down at halftime, and they came back in what some call the greatest comeback in their history in European competition to win the game 28-21. A star-studded Toulouse team, one must say. Definitely not one that was rested.
I think the comments that we made last week about Glasgow Warriors is completely warranted. They haven't been firing the way that they were last season. And so, even just last week's game was testament to where they are in terms of like hot and cold and just not being consistent enough. So the fact that the first half ended up being the way that it was pretty much in line with what we've been saying. The fact that they managed to fight back and win the game in the second half, hats off, because that was very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Toulouse did, for that first half, look like they were really cruising in what seemed to be tricky conditions, definitely very wet and a little bit windy, and raced ahead in that first half. And then you almost have to think what was said at the halftime break, that Glasgow came out and actually managed to front up to a very strong Toulouse side and definitely take the game to them. Obviously, it wasn't running rugby that scored Glasgow a lot of the tries. It was very much sort of some strong forward play, some good carries that got them over the line. But to come back against a Toulouse side like that is definitely deserves a lot of respect.
I think the halftime talk must have been something about how embarrassing this is, losing at home 2-0. So that must have been the big kick in the butt that they got. But as you said, the conditions were tricky, and the wind was pretty strong. Most of the kickers needing an assistance to come and hold the ball down so that it didn't fall over when they were doing their pace kicking. So you did see that in the first half, Glasgow Warriors were playing against the wind, whereas Toulouse was playing with the wind. And then the second half, it obviously turns around, and anybody who's ever run in the wind will know that it's definitely a lot easier running with the wind than it is running against it, as well as passing. So, it's a bit of a...
I do believe all the tries were scored on one side of the pitch. Tough luck if you bought your tickets for the other side of the pitch. You didn't see a lot of action.
Got to see nothing.
Toulouse is dealing with a little bit of off-field drama. They're under investigation currently by the top 14 for their signing of Jaminet, and some speculating that increased speculation about this and what a possible ban could look like might add to their sort of uneasy form to start the year. I don't think losing away to Glasgow is necessarily a big drama, but at the same time, I think a lot of people would have put them as their pre-tournament favourites, and not many people would have expected to lose when they did star-stud their team. That backline was filled with talent.
What is the controversy around Jaminet's signing?
Around the amount they signed him for and how they paid for it. That's what I believe and what I've read.
Okay.
Maybe it's a similar sort of situation as we had in Saracens back in the day, but I'd be lying if I said I was so clued up on about it. I just saw that some French journalists were writing that there's a lot of off-the-field talk for Toulouse right now.
Maybe one of the...
You'd think, though, that players can usually put that out of their head. It's not something that necessarily would impact them when it's legal battles.
Maybe somebody can comment down below and inform us on what's the haps there, as we do not understand French.
Yeah. A game that many would have picked as the game of the weekend is Toulon against Bath. A real slug match, 45-34 for Toulon. Anything you want to add on that game for us?
It's crazy to me to see that so many teams, and especially it's really showcased in this particular match, that so many teams or matchups are scoring so high. You know, it's not necessarily the case that it's 50-0, but it's 45-34. So both teams are scoring a lot, meaning that both defenses are pretty leaky, because if you can get 30 points on anybody, that you would say either your attack was really good or your defense was really bad. So I don't know if we're currently seeing a battle of attacks who can outscore the other person the quickest, or if it's a battle of like whose defense is less weak. But yeah, having those many points in one test match is quite a lot.
I think it's for two such, I mean, those are real juggernauts of European rugby to be in the same group. I think both of them would have looked at this match and said, okay, maybe this is a marker to put down for the rest of the competition. Obviously, Bath going away would have probably said they've got nothing to lose here, because if they manage to get a win against Toulon away, that's a real bonus point. Toulon obviously not starting the season round one too well. It's important for them to get a victory here, but Bath do walk away with a bonus point, which I think at the end of the round robin or group stage could form important, depending on where you land. I think let's take that as an avenue to get into the format of the Champions Cup. Obviously, South African teams have been added. We spoke about it last week, how we have the feeling that South African teams are being accepted a bit more. La Rochelle came out before the season started, when the fixtures were released, and sort of started complaining a little bit about, I don't know if it's necessarily about South Africa being in it, but they will definitely be a part of it. But they also complained that they had to fly for one game down to Port Elizabeth. It's obviously a lot of connections. You know, you've got to get to Paris, and then from Paris you've got to get to Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth. So it is far to travel. The Stormers also traveled down from the north, but I believe the attitude is sort of like the format and the way the scheduling works is not optimized yet. If South African teams are here to stay, something needs to change.
Look, in this particular season, you have 3 South African teams that are in the competition, and those 3 South African teams are split over 3 different pools. So one pool, and I think in this case it is pool 2, so the one with Bath, Castres, Munster, Toulon, Gloucester, and Edinburgh, they don't ever have to travel to South Africa. So in terms of traveling, logistics, rotation, stuff like that, they don't have to go through the same taxing flights as the other pools do. I think La Rochelle was complaining a little bit about the fact that they had to go compete in PE rather than Cape Town. Now, if that really makes that much of a difference, I'm not sure. I don't think it really does, because either way, you're going to have to get a connecting flight. But I can understand there being a complaint, because for them, they feel hard done by when other pools don't have to have the same logistical nightmare.
It's I think with the way the format is structured now, the fact that you have 4 pools with 6 teams in it, and 4 of those teams make it through, the barrier to entry to reach the knockout stages is quite low. You can really pick and choose the games that you need to win when you get your schedule. And I think La Rochelle, obviously, they're getting an excuse out just to cover their own backs, but they were going to play a rotated team, whether it was in Cape Town or a PE anyway, I believe, because I think they'll highlight some of their home matches, and will definitely not necessarily look at a game away in South Africa as one where they need to score a lot of points.
You say that, but the problem was with that particular pool. I mean, if you look at who's in it, it's Stormers, Leinster, Harlequins, La Rochelle, Leicester, and Bayonne. Stormers are currently top of the URC. Leinster won the URC last year. Harlequins, always a tricky candidate to go up against. Leicester was in the finals of the Premiership last year. And then you got Bayonne. So it can very easily happen that La Rochelle and Bayonne are the 2 teams that go out.
Based on just looking at the logs and looking at the teams by name, yes, I completely agree with you. That could be a case easily. But depending which of those teams you play away and home, you'll probably look at that and say, okay, even a Leicester Tigers will lose a few away games, or even a Bayonne will struggle to get a few wins. And Harlequins, they're good at home and they're always good for an upset, but they'll struggle to travel as well. So I think La Rochelle and the Stormers, I think for that matter, I don't think the Stormers are above any of that as well. I think the only team of that group that looks at every game and says we can win every game is probably Leinster. I think all of them look at that table and say, all right, let's try win all our home games and see if we can win one away. For the Stormers to win against Bayonne was massive. Obviously, Bayonne rotated a lot. I think maybe they thought they could beat a Stormers outfit with their second string team, but these are sort of the gambles that you're starting to take. And the question is this is this worthy of the European Cup? We're obviously coming into it quite new and quite fresh, but there has been arguments made that the European Cup shouldn't be one where you should rotate in any match. It should be the best against the best in all matches. And the new format has sort of forced teams into looking at calendars and looking at travel times with the South African teams involved, and just saying we're okay with losing one.
For me, the big problem with this tournament is that it is broken up into little bits. So you have a section of the tournament that runs parallel to the URC, or runs in between the URC. Then you have a section of the tournament that then runs in between or parallel to the Six Nations. So there's a lot of like stop-start in the tournament.
Yeah, but it's the same in football in the Champions League. You play in the windows that you're given. The Champions League runs concurrent to all the leagues, and you sort of have those breaks in which you play these games. Because I don't know if you can get a full European tournament into its own window. There's just too many teams and there's just too many games, I think having that sit aside a normal league phase would just be, the calendar's just not big enough, we already complain about the rugby calendar as it is, with it not being aligned, and there's just no window to place more tournaments. They have to run concurrently to one another.
I'd say it's very difficult to compare it to football, because in football you're not, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not getting as many injuries. So your death doesn't necessarily need to be as
toll
deep.
You have on your body is not the same. Yeah.
I don't know if it's maybe also teams don't think they're going to make it past the round of 16s anyway, so they're not going to risk it. They'd rather than look at their domestic leagues and try and save their players for that, but would like to still be in the competition because of the financial injection of it.
Yeah, this is the maybe the next step to talk about whether the qualification processes are the right ones. All of the teams in these leagues either play in the Champions or in the Challenge Cup, and the question maybe is there, whether other than the URC. Sorry, the URC has teams that don't play in either, but in the other two leagues, all of the teams qualify for one or the other league. And maybe the question is fair to say, does the bottom of the French league need to play in a European competition, or are they is that just maybe a step too far for them? Because you're seeing some big scores put past teams. I mean, this week alone, and it will have been due to rotation, but Bordeaux put 50 past Scarlets, Munster put 30 past Gloucester, Harlequins 68 against Bayonne, Castrip put out Edinburgh 33-0 because they had to rotate. Northampton put 50 past the Bulls, and Bristol put 60 past Power. And then you sort of ask yourself, are you really watching that much competitive rugby, or are the early rounds just sort of a luck of the draw? Who's in your group? How much do you have to travel to and from South Africa? And does the real European rugby competition only start in the knockout stages?
What are the different options of mitigate or avoiding this? Because if I think about an option now, sort of off the cuff, I would have to think you get your qualification through your placing or your seeding from your domestic league, and then you just go straight into knockout rugby.
Yeah, and that's tough, because I think then they don't make enough money off the actual competition, the organizers, and it doesn't run long enough. So I don't know if it's viable. I mean, the old format where it was 4 teams per group and the top 2 got through did seem to make it a little bit more competitive, in a sense that you really had to try and be the best. I don't even know what the reasoning was for them moving away from that. But the way that it is now is sort of similar to where the Rugby World Cup has become. They've added more teams, but that's made it very uncompetitive in the group stages. You're sort of going through the motions a bit. The big teams are probably not going to stumble, and the real blockbuster games are only going to happen later in the competition. And then the question is, who's benefiting from that? Are the amount of people who are going to watch the group stage is still going to be as big so that it warrants it?
The irony is that they've actually done the exact opposite to what they did in the World Cup, because in the World Cup they've increased the pools and reduced the pool size, whereas here they've reduced the number of pools but increased the pool size. But the problem is that you've still got so many people that are going through in the pool. The pool stages aren't really that relevant, and it's so you've lost the jeopardy there, because you're letting more people. I mean, over 50% of the teams that are in the pool go through the pool stages, and in the World Cup it's 50% go through, so there's no jeopardy there. So it's I mean, it's the opposite system, but it's the same problem.
Yeah, I mean, far be it from us to criticize how European rugby is run, but the dream of every rugby fan, when a competition like this exists, is to have, let's say, the best 4 teams from South Africa compete against the best 4 teams from France and the best 4 teams from England, and see who comes out on top. That's sort of what you dream about as fans when you look at this competition, and that's maybe not what you're getting in the real product. Now, these might be teething issues. This might be sorted out in years to come, when teams sort of get used to their own schedules. I think French teams, to a certain extent, some of them will at least always prioritize their top 14 clashes. The big ones who can afford it will definitely try and commit to both. And in the URC, there's not that many teams who really can fight on both fronts consistently, and I think we're seeing that now. I mean, Glasgow doing very well now, beating Toulouse, but they're struggling a little bit in the URC. Their form's been patchy. Same goes for the Bulls. The Stormers are obviously maybe in this season a bit of an outlier because they've found a bit of form, but Leinster also can't seem to compete on both sides consistently. Who knows? Maybe we're just witnessing a bit of teething issues, and this will all sort itself out in the future.
We need to get a billionaire in to put a massive cash incentive to winning this tournament, and maybe some of the teams will start really pulling their weight.
Yeah, you also, I mean, you need the money to flow all the way down the pyramid. You need all of the teams that are participating in this to just get wealthy by participating, and that each game you win really is a massive cash injection. But as we all know, rugby isn't at that level. So we'll see what happens. No doubt it's definitely a good competition to be in. I think we were singing its praises last week. But it's also good to get back into the URC from next week. There's some big clashes happening in the South African hemisphere from next week onwards. It's the South African leg of the URC for us. So some good local derbies to look forward to.
And for anybody who knows, in South Africa, as of the 1st of December, nobody works anymore. So I hope that we finally have chock-a-block stadiums and people bring the vibes.
Let's hope so. Anything else you want to add for this week?
Not today. I think, good to see the European Cup underway. Challenger Cup also happened, but we're not going to dive into that. But good to see some European rugby and look forward to when it returns.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. It's a bit of a different format now. We're going to go like this for the next 1.5 months while we're all traveling a little bit. We'll try to get as much content as we can over this time. We appreciate you all for listening and for getting involved in the comments, letting us know your thoughts. We learn a lot about other countries' rugby from your comments and from your emails. So thanks a lot for getting involved.
Thank you very much. Have a great one.
And we'll see you again next week.